Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. I'm also fine. Now, yesterday I watched horrible things on TV. Protests that were meant to be peaceful against the murder of Albert Ojwang turned out to be chaotic. And we saw state-sponsored goons being escorted by police to terrorize and infiltrate peaceful protesters.
Hadi wako escorted na karao.
After being escorted by police into the Nairobi CBD, we saw the state-sponsored goons chasing after peaceful protesters and making sure that the protests did not continue as planned. A peaceful, unarmed face mask vendor was also shot in the process. Now in this video I want us to look into who had sent these goons that terrorized peaceful protesters in Nairobi CBD yesterday, why these goons were sent, and the wider scope behind the sending of these goons. And without any further ado, let's get into it. Now, number one, allow me to state categorically without fear of contradiction that it is Governor Johnson Sakaja of Nairobi who had sent these goons to terrorize and infiltrate peaceful protesters in the Nairobi CBD. And allow me to bring to your attention a video of Governor Johnson Sakaja promising that should there be any protests, he himself would be there to supervise the infiltration of peaceful protests by armed goons. These are not my words, the video is here.
Haitafanyika tena Nairobi. Haitafanyika. Ukiona watu wanachoma magari, yani mtu umetoka umeenda town na gari yako inachomwa, that will not bring back our brother. Si ni kweli? Ukikiuka hiyo, this country must be a country of the rule of law. So wasijaribu tena. Watanipata town. Si ni kweli? Tutakuwa hapo. Tutachunga mali ya wananchi.
True to his words. When the goons that had been sent by Sakaja arrived in the Nairobi CBD, they actually confirmed to the nation that it is Governor Sakaja who had sent them to quote-unquote kulinda jiji. One of them was caught reporting to Governor Sakaja that tumelinda jijini.
Gavana Igwe! Sakaja! Tumelinda jiji! Na tuwaogopi wakuja sasa! Wakuje! Wakuje sasa! Igwe siku zote! Mbwekse tuko hapo!
Sakaja mbwekse.
Mbwekse. Siku zote. Siku zote. Siku zote. Siku zote. Siku zote. Kuja.
You see, in politics, nothing occurs by accident. Everything is usually well planned, well orchestrated, or well executed. And most importantly, politicians know each other, whether they be on different political divides. And that explains why even Babu Owino understood that it is Governor Johnson Sakaja, with the full support of President William Ruto, who had orchestrated and planned for the goons to infiltrate peaceful protesters who are protesting against the brutal murder of Albert Ojwang. Here's what Babu Owino says about Sakaja sponsoring the goons to infiltrate peaceful protests.
To the Governor of Nairobi, Johnson Sakaja, your actions today do not make you strong. Hurting others does not give you power. It reveals your weakness. It reveals your fear. It reveals your utter lack of respect for the rule of law. And we will not allow fear to win. I want to tell you clearly that you've hurt so many people, but the goons that you've hired today at the CBD to hurt people during demonstrations, and we will not take it lightly.
Last week, during the first protests against the brutal murder of Albert Ojwang, we saw something similar to what we saw yesterday, except that during that time, the government itself purchased vehicles and torched them in the Nairobi CBD, reason being to paint these peaceful protests as violent and thus justify the need to use brutal force and thus do away with the protests eventually. And this is a tactic that is well known. This is not something new. Even Mike Sonko had revealed a while back when he and his team were warring against the ODM, and he had revealed that walinunua magari na wakanunua t-shirts zenye zimeandikwa ODM, wakapea watu wakavaa hizo t-shirts za ODM na wakaenda wakachoma hizo magari, and they put the blame on the ODM. So this is politics, and we know how it works. These are tactics that probably could work in the 1990s when people would depend on radio for information, but now everything can be found on Twitter. And the clearest of all ideas of the government is the deliberate plot to taint these peaceful protests as violent, and thus justify the need before the international community to use extra violence. And I'm afraid to say that this is not going to work, because this generation is apparently different. For the rest of this video, I want us to look at why the government is in a desperate need to calm down these protests, or rather to do away with these protests altogether. Number one is because the William Ruto regime is ashamed of how he has been leading this country. It is a shame of the president before the international community. Yani Ruto anaona aibu. If every other time people are protesting, there are unrest, there are civil unrest, protest, maandamano, kila mahali, kila wakati, ni aibu kwa rais. That is why he is desperately making attempts away with these protests, and he is willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that there are no more protests and that he can rule and do whatever he wants peacefully without any interference from citizens. And number two is because these protests are likely to result into a political instability. It is not politically convenient for the president to be in government, or rather to be in leadership, when there are protests day in, day out. And that is why the president and his team is desperate to do away with these protests, whether they be peaceful or violent. Finally, number three, these protests are attracting a lot of international attention. Recently, when Albert Ojwang was tortured and killed under police custody, even the US government had to speak to ensure that justice is done. So in a nutshell, it is Governor Johnson Sakaja, under the unilateral support of the William Ruto regime, who planned, funded, and sent goons to infiltrate peaceful protesters in the Nairobi CBD yesterday. And we have played all the videos to show that evidence. Do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below, because at the end of the day, these are just but my opinions. Do let me know yours. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more informative content such as this.